Welcome to TJHD Talks. We're delighted that you've chosen to join us either here on the live stream or on our YouTube channel. This session is dedicated to the life and memory of our founding chairman and our champion, Tad Toby. A visionary and generous philanthropist, Tad's unwavering commitment to Poland, his homeland, to promoting the Polish Jewish story and history, supporting research and scholarship, and strengthening Jewish life and culture brings us all here together on this broadcast. Our celebration of the 60th anniversary of the Littman Library of Jewish Civilization is a fitting tribute to his legacy. We are honored to host our guests, Connie Weber, Professors Antony Polonsky, Natalia Aleksiun, Shaul Stampfer, and Marcin Wodzińnski. The conversation among our panelists will run approximately 45 to 50 minutes, followed by a brief Q&A session. We invite you, as usual, to post your question in the chat section. And it is now my pleasure and honor to turn the mic over to Connie Weber. Connie.
My name is Connie Weber, and I've had the privilege of being Littman's managing editor for almost 37 years. So celebrating our 60th year of publishing with a global audience is really a very big deal. I'd like to thank Helise Lieberman and Shaul Stampfer at the Toby Foundation for hosting this webinar, and Ruth Gruber for suggesting it. Before we start, I'd like to introduce one simple idea. It's an old Chinese proverb, but I think it's very relevant. When you drink the water, remember the spring. The water in this case is the flow of ideas that our distinguished panelists will be producing for this event, and indeed the ideas they have produced in the past in the books they published. The spring that allowed them to bubble forth, though, is in large measure the Littman Library of Jewish Civilization. They've also published elsewhere, but all our panelists have published multiple books with Littman. Littman may be known to many of you, primarily because of our annual publication. But I'd like to take a couple of moments to explain the vision that guides everything. Publishing scholarly books in Jewish studies is not a profitable enterprise. Few books we publish even cover their costs. We're able to do what we do because of the foresight and dedication of one man, Louis Littman, who realized the need to encourage scholarship in Jewish studies after the devastation of the Holocaust. In 1965, he founded the Littman Library of Jewish Civilization in London as a charity in memory of his father. Its sole purpose being to publish books that explore, explain, and perpetuate Judaism and the Jewish heritage. That is what we have been doing ever since. Louis Littman died in 1987 at the young age of 62, but his family, led by his widow, Colette Littman, have continued his mission. It's nearly 40 years now since Louis died, and Colette is now over 90 and blind, but she takes an interest in everything we do. Thanks to her and the support of her family members and our other directors, Professors Martin Goodman and Jeremy Schonfield, we're able to continue publishing books that offer outstanding scholarship, objectivity, and new insights, and to produce them to a high standard. These are the guidelines that Louis Littman established, and we continue to adhere to them. We've published some 250 titles, most still in print, many of them considered classics. And of course, a large number of our books are about the Jewish culture and history of Poland, including the yearbook Polin, which is about to celebrate its own 40th anniversary under the leadership of Professor Antony Polonsky. But we've published many other books on Poland too. In his lifetime, Louis worked with different partner presses to achieve his goals. And since 2017, we have partnered with the Liverpool University Press to amplify our marketing reach and facilitate electronic publishing. This has allowed Litman to become a world-renowned publishing company, the only English-language publishing house in Europe devoted entirely to academic Jewish studies. I'm confident that this session, with 4 of our authors participating, will exemplify what we do. I hope that what they say will be a source of inspiration. And I said at the beginning, when you drink the water, remember the spring.
Very moving introduction, and for giving a sense of the purpose, the source, the water, the well from which these endeavors, these publications have come. And we're delighted to be here to celebrate with you and your colleagues, and certainly with all the authors, as you mentioned, 4 of whom are here with us. And so without further ado, I turn the mic over to Professor Antony Polonsky, and we look forward to an intriguing and thought-provoking conversation. Antony.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here this evening. I should say at the outset that this is a sad occasion in that we are remembering the very distinguished contribution of Tad Taube to Jewish studies, and we're very sorry that he can't be here. Connie has spoken very eloquently of the contribution of the Littman Library and of Louis Littman himself and of Colette Littman to Jewish studies. Tonight we're going to be discussing this, and we have 3 Littman authors to describe how this contribution has worked out in practice. Let me briefly introduce them. Firstly, Natalia Aleksiun is the Harry Rich Professor of Holocaust Studies at the University of Florida, and she published with Littman an important book, Conscious History, Polish Jewish Historians Before the Holocaust. She's also the author of Where To? The Zionist Movement in Poland, 1944 to 1950, and she was an author and editor of one of the volumes of Polin, volume 36, which dealt with Jewish childhood in Eastern Europe. The most recent book that she is in the process of producing is an edition of the family correspondence of Lola and Zygmunt Taube, the parents of Tad Taube. I'm happy to say that I've read this book. It's a major contribution, and I'm very glad that it was completed so that Tad could see it before he died. She's a very distinguished professor, and we're very glad that she's on the panel this evening. The second contributor is Shaul Stampfer, who grew up in Portland, Oregon, gained a BA from the Yeshiva University, and subsequently a PhD from the Hebrew University, where he spent most of his academic life. He did spend 2.5 years in Moscow, where he directed the Center for Jewish Studies. He's published 2 major books with the Littman Library, Families, Rabbis and Education, and Lithuanian Yeshivas in the 19th century, but he's also written widely on other topics, most significantly on the question of, did the Chazars actually convert to Judaism? In his retirement, he's continued to publish on such themes as the custom of Kest, the secularization of European Jewry, and the impact of the Union Pacific Railroad on Russian Jewish history, a very unusual and interesting topic. The last speaker is another Littman author, Marcin Wodzińnski. He's the professor of Jewish history and literature at the University of Wrocław, where he heads the Toby Department of Jewish Studies. His research focuses on the history and culture of East European Jews in modern times, and he's published 2 major books with the Littman Library, which previously appeared in Poland. I'll give only the English titles. The first is Haskalah and Hasidism in the Kingdom of Poland, and the second, Hasidism and Politics, the Kingdom of Poland. He's also the co-editor of a very important historical atlas, the Historical Atlas of Hasidism, and was co-author with David Asaf, David Biel, Benjamin Brown, Uriel Gelman, Samuel Hellman, and Moshe Rossman and Gad Sagiv of the path-breaking Hasidism, A New History. So these are the 3 participants in our discussion this evening. What I think we'll do is we'll pose one question to each of them and invite the particular participant to speak on this, but also to encourage the other 2 people who are here to give their remarks on this. And then we'll ask a general question, and hopefully we'll also be able to have some questions from the online audience. So the first question is the one that I have to pose to Shaul. And what I've asked Shaul is, how far have Littman books contributed to changing attitudes in the Jewish world to Poles and Poland? Shaul.
Summarize my views in a few words by saying I'm not really sure. Because to measure impact on a large population in the Jewish world, different countries, different places, is very, very difficult. And I don't think even surveys of a large scale would be able to measure either the changes in attitudes in the Jewish world and to identify what is it that changes the attitudes, because so many factors come into play, whether it be general changes in society, the mass media, visits to Poland or visits of acquaintances to Poland, movies, and to isolate the impact of the Littman Library is very difficult to do precisely. At the same time, it's very clear that in many circles, the choice of topics and the choice of approaches has changed radically in the world of Jewish scholarship in the post-Holocaust period. There was a time when people who were the major researchers in Jewish history, my teachers, could speak about Poland on the basis of Polish Jewry, on the basis of memory of pre-Holocaust Poland. And it was only in recent decades that researchers such as Gershon Hundert, Gershon Bacon, Moshe Rossman, who came up, who were not born in Poland, were not familiar firsthand with the life of pre-Holocaust Poland, but nonetheless, in the English-speaking world, went on to create extremely important studies in Polish Jewish history. And in Poland itself, the scholars such as my friend, my colleague, Marcin Wodzińnski, and others are very much the same, a post-Holocaust generation. And I think that the Littman Library set the tone of how one carries out a discussion. The emphasis on fairness, the emphasis on a wide scope, the emphasis on documentation, sources, clarity, the emphasis on collegiality, which really typified both the editorial work, that was the work that was done with my publications, and also the work of the incredibly important Polin series, which set a level of impartial academic discourse and showed that there is not one Poland, but there are many Polands. There is not one Jewish community, but many Jewish communities in the past and in the present. And while it would be difficult to say that this has changed the world, it has certainly set a standard by which many people directly or indirectly measure their own work and or the work of others. And for this, I can only say we have to be very, very grateful.
Now, I'd like to ask the other two panelists the same question, which is, as scholars and authors who've published important books with the Littman Library, what has been the impact of the Littman Library publications on Polish Jewish scholarship and research? Natalia.
Let me unmute myself. I was already raising my hand to follow up on Shaul's important comments. So I want to say first that I'm really proud of this title, Littman author, but also one that I really cherish. But I also was someone that was introduced to the Littman Library quite literally visually as I looked at the shelves in the Żoliborz apartment of my Dr. Vater of Professor Jerzy, late Professor Jerzy Tomaszewski. And I remember seeing the first volumes of Polin there, and that was like a holy grail of Polish Jewish studies. We're talking about early 90s. And so this transformation is not just through making the sophisticated, well-researched, well-discussed knowledge available, but also including scholars in Poland in the conversation. And I co-edited with Antony, among others, 3 volumes of Polin, and it was always very clear that we wanted scholars working in Poland to be part of this conversation, not just as potential audience, but also as contributors. And so this is changing at least the academic world by making this conversation not just mature and diplomatically sophisticated and friendly, and even though no topics are off limits in the study of Jewish past, but also making it clear that this is a conversation in which scholars who were raised and educated in Poland are equal partners. And that partnership creates a unique value. So it's not just measured by citations, and I started looking at some citations in most recent publications by scholars of Polish Jewish history working in Poland, but also people who belong to this conversation with their contributions in Polin journal, now journal, and in monographs. And I'm thinking among many, for example, of Marek Tuszewicki and his work, but the list goes on and on. So this is just a tiny addition from, a young graduate student looking at the shelves to someone who can appreciate how much this body of scholarship grew.
If I could, I would like to echo what Natalia said, in a sense that what happened thanks to the Littman Library makes your question, Antony, kind of irrelevant, because this division between Jewish studies in Poland or Polish Jewish studies happening in Poland and what is international field of Jewish studies do not exist anymore. This is one area that is cultivated in much wider and interchanging way, that is going both and forth and back. And actually, what is a huge contribution of the Littman Library and Polin specifically is how it went gradually. It was not only that we looked at those early volumes of Polin on the shelves of some of our teachers, but also quite early in stage, we met you, Antony, we met other people, and we realized this is a forum for all sorts of scholarship to be published, to the extent we might not remember it anymore, but in the 1990s, for a Polish scholar to have an article translated into English was huge achievement also in financial terms. So the fact that Polin provided funds to make it happen was very important. And not only to have it published in poor Polish style English, but high quality language, and to make this article into the standard of international debate. And this was happening first with articles published in Polin, and then with first monographs that were invited. My monograph came to Litman thanks to Shaul, who is here, who at the conference in 2004 just stood up and said, there is an interesting monograph in Polish, who will help us to have it in English? And then Ada Rapaport-Albert, Zichrona Livraha, said, okay, I know certain publisher who is very eager to publish high quality research. I'll talk to her. It was Ada talking to Connie, and then it went. This was my personal story that I wanted to share with you, because Connie and Shaul are here, and also Antony, who published my first articles in English. So this is how the field has been integrated into one field. There's nothing like Jewish studies in Poland and international Jewish studies out there. It's one field. I believe so. I feel very strongly how it is integrated. And the role of the Litman Library is absolutely central for this.
Shaul, would you like to add some more to this? You're muted.
Unmute yourself.
I certainly agree with everything that was said, and I think that the additional routes of communication, whether at conferences, the ability to travel freely back and forth, or whether through meetings like this, which are through the electronic media, have really made the world of Polish Jewish studies a very tight-knit and I would add also a friendly world, one in which people cooperate, share materials, make comments. Sometimes looking back at descriptions of previous generations where polemics seem to have been at the basis of conversations, I think that the English tradition, as far as I understand it, of a gentlemanly or gentlewomanly conversation have really begun to set the tone in Polish Jewish studies. And all of this, I think, is for the better.
Good. Now, I've already asked Shaul to say how Littman books have contributed to changing attitudes in the Jewish world towards Poles and Poland. And so I'd like now to pose a question to Natalia. How far have Littman books contributed to changing attitudes in Poland and among Jews to the role of Jewish women in Polish Jewish life and the wider society? A very big question, but one which I think is
indeed. I will echo Shaul's initial response, and again I'll say it's wonderful to sit on the same Zoom with one's mentors and teachers and dear colleagues. So I have no idea about the world, but I would like to say a few words about the academic world, which is a little easier to follow. And I think that this might also reflect bigger, broader, wider cultural changes, but that really would require a study worthy of publishing by Littman Library in and of itself. So I'm thinking about the volume 18 of Polin, one that for many, many years was on a shelf, easy to grab wherever I had a shelf with my basic books, which is Jewish Women in Eastern Europe, volume 18, published in 2006. It still seems to me like it's a very recent publication, but obviously almost two decades passed since. And I've been thinking about how much this volume itself, in and of itself, has done, how many scholars continue to quote it, continue to compare their specific research questions to those posed and somewhat pioneering chapters that were included in this volume. And also to mention Moshe Rossman's absolutely critical volume of essays that came out in English and in Polish, but in English was titled Categorically Jewish, Distinctively Polish, and it has a separate chapter on the history of Jewish women. Now, between those two, there is a decade and a half, and I can think of two directions in which Polish Jewish academic writing and thinking developed. So one is continuing on two fields or subfields that usually are associated with women in general and Jewish women, in this case, Polish Jewish women. One is the domestic realm and the other is education. So this found expression in studies published in other volumes of Polin that did not have women on the cover, but dealt, for example, with education. And in the most recent publications, let me just mention a Polish book that I was very much looking forward to by Alicja Maślak-Maciejewska, Poza Cheder, Beyond the Cheder, Galician Jews in Public Schools. This is a fruition of a very prestigious national humanities project. So there are those studies, and if you look at publications on the history of education in Poland and history of Jewish educational initiatives published by scholars in Poland or Polish scholars working abroad, and I agree with Marcin that these divides are very fluid now. They become more and more fluid.
Exactly. Where are you? Where are you then? On which side of the border you are personally,
yeah,
Natalia?
I will leave it for dessert if there is time. So there is this aspect. And then if we look at studies of the younger generation, such as Alicja, of scholars of Polish Jewish history, many of whom do work in Poland, and Poland has become an important center of Polish Jewish studies. So if we look at the work of Kamil Kijek, of Magdalena Kozłowska, of Agnieszka Jagodzińska, I'm mentioning some of the scholars working at the Department of Jewish Studies in Wrocław and also in Kraków at Jagiellonian University, of Zuzanna Kołodziejska-Smagała. They touch on cultural history, political history, embodied history. So a lot of these studies are really cutting edge in terms of Jewish studies. So taking these cutting edge questions that used to be, women and this question, women and that question. And what they propose is very much an integrated history in which the questions of women's history and gender history are part of the conversation and not a separate chapter at the end. I also want to mention that important primary texts, memoirs and diaries by Jewish women, East European, Polish, Galician Jewish women have been published in series that Janna Degler shepherded, Malka Lee, Paulina Węgerow, and many others. Polish history of Polish Jewish women has really transformed Holocaust studies in Poland, and that includes also this most vibrant, I think, aspect of Holocaust studies, which is aftermath studies that look at the lives of survivors. And I'll just mention Ewa Koźmińska-Frejlak's book Po Zagładzie, After the Holocaust, which also draws on publications that came out with Littman. So it's not a simple trajectory from this book published by the Littman Library to the book of Polish Jewish scholar, of scholar on Polish Jewish history, to the general views of the population beyond academic realm. But I think that we are looking in the last 2 decades for sure at making the history of Jewish women absolutely implicit part of the conversation in all kinds of realms, with interest ranging from political, cultural, literary, and other subfields of Jewish studies. And it's very much connected to the body of knowledge that has come through Littman and that continues to come with it. And I'll just add an anecdotal note as a proud editor of 3 volumes, co-editor of 3 volumes of Polin, and hope this is not the last, which is that Polish academic system, and Marcin knows about it painfully much, is to some extent defined by points that one needs to get, and publications are assigned various numbers depending on ministerial lists. And Polin has not been very lucky to be giving you a lot of points, and yet young scholars, mid-career scholars, senior scholars are eager to be included in these volumes because they have soft spot and they understand how important of a venue it is. So they take very, very meager response in terms of how they define their productivity for the pleasure of being part of the Littman conversation.
Well, we're certainly trying to change this. And now I'll ask Marcin to give his reaction to how Littman has impacted Polish Jewish scholarship and research.
I would like to add to what Natalia was saying about impact on this Jewish women history and perspective. One area that you did not mention, maybe, but you did mention, Joanna Degre, is Yiddish studies. And this transformed amazingly because this kind of merged perspective on Jewish women and on Yiddish as the language for women and language at which women literature is published. And actually, the huge boom of Jewish studies in Poland, in big part, is a boom on Yiddish, and blurring distinction between literary studies and historical research on Yiddish culture. And this is part, I believe, very important part of this general change that you're talking. But after this, I would like to add another question, and this question is not to us, but possibly to Connie, because Natalia, you are talking about women as a topic, as a subject of research, but there's also a critically important issue of women as authors of the scholarship, and your presence here, and also many of the names that you listed, they are Litman authors that came into the field. Well, obviously, this is a question to Connie, how far clearly a feminist agenda was guiding selection of those women, but this is from outsider perspective. It is very clear that very strong representation of women authors, which is not so obvious in very patriarchal way, where it emerged, with so many authors coming from, if we look on history of Hasidism, for example, you have Oraviskin Elpert, if you go into Bohemian studies, you have this excellent study by Sharon Flatow, and on, right? Rachel Elio, obviously, and many other studies by women. So it's not only about the topic, but also the importance of having them fully involved.
Marcin,
So
could I also just ask you one other question, which is,
yeah,
how do you
please.
think the work of Polish scholars in Jewish studies has been amplified by contact with the Littman Library and with contact in the English-speaking world?
I would say it is not one. Actually, I believe I responded to this question already. It's not one way. This is the English-speaking world was also amplified by contact with Polish scholarship, and this is thanks to Litman. That's the role of the I don't know, facilitator. The fact that we were able to read the scholarship, but also that we were able to publish, and that we are not a separate entity within this debate. I think this is critically important. To me, it was my first English book, which made it was very well received, if I may say so. And actually made much of my career. So that's what I'm repeating for last 20 years. The book in Polish would make no impact. It would be visible in Poland only. The book translated and beautifully translated and very carefully translated. Connie, you must remember our discussion, hours and hours of discussion, how to translate publicisti, whatever it is in English, right? It's not journalists, it's not whatever it is, authors, writers, right? Something that in Polish it was self-contained, and also our stylistic issues with overuse of variety of forms I was overusing because of my Polish background. So this obviously introduced me how to write a proper book in English, and this knowledge I'm carrying with me throughout all of my career. And I believe the same happened to Marek Tuszewicki that Natalia already mentioned, and other authors writing chapters for Polin and contributing to other volumes with Polin. So that's one way. But another one is that by publishing Polin and reading this stuff, not only on Polish Jewish history, but huge library of Litman publications available to us, made very graphically to us, because Natalia, as you're saying, if you enter any studio of any scholar of Polish Jewish history or East European Jewish history, you see this beautiful, deep purple color
a wall
of books by Litman, and you know where you are, right? You see the color, and you don't need to read individual titles.
You don't see, you just see.
It's so prominently there. It's so prominently there. So I think that's the point.
I probably have to draw this part of our discussion to an end, but I would underline what has been said by the three participants in the discussion. Littman has had the highest editorial standards and the highest standards in translation. And this has meant that scholars in Poland have had access to the wider scholarly world, the world of English-speaking scholarship, and this is also true of people in Israel. All of the three authors, Shaul is part of the Israeli scholarly world, Marcin and Natalia are part of the Polish scholarly world, have the books in English.
No, Natalia is American. Sorry, Natalia is American. If Shaul is Israeli, then Natalia is American.
Well,
right.
Well, yes, I suppose so. One can be part of more than one world. Well, I think that we all agree that the Littman Library's contribution, over 250 books, the nearly 40 volumes of Polin, has made a huge impact on the Polish Jewish scholarship, and we very much hope this will continue. I think that we are in a difficult world today, and we should now move to a more general question. And the more general question that we're looking at is, how is rising nationalism, anti-Semitism, and the conflict in the Middle East affecting interest in Jewish studies in Poland, the USA, and Israel? As Marcin correctly pointed out, he's Polish, Natalia is American, and Shaul is Israeli. So why don't I ask Marcin to kick off on this problem, and then we'll ask Natalia and then Shaul to contribute.
The Israeli conflict is literally killing Polish Jewish studies in Poland these days. And this is mostly expressed by the number of applicants to our BA and MA programs. We went from 160 applicants 20 years ago to 25 applicants this year. And it's very radical drop. And even more so, of those 25, it's usually no more than half of them that stay with us longer than one semester. It has obvious implications. We have numerous refusals of cooperation because of position on Israel and Gaza war from variety of directions. And I don't think this is something that is passing, that this is the mood of the moment. I'm very much afraid that anti-Israeli rhetorics and the reaction to atrocities of the Gazan war make into kind of generational experience for many young people globally. And it might be not so fully understandable for people in the United States or Israel, because the vast majority of those that come to Jewish studies, to programs Jewish studies, are Jewish anyway. So they come there for mostly for identity issues. But in Europe, it's very different. It is also identity issue, but it's identity about learning about other minorities, about sensitivity towards minority groups, underprivileged groups, oppressed groups, groups that develop beautiful culture and flourish under the stress of oppressive situations. So this is people with very special sensitivity, very special worldviews in very general sense. It's not about ideology, political ideology specifically, but about certain approach towards reality that for them, Jewish studies were especially attractive. And this pool of people is shrinking radically today. So even if Jewish studies are developing beautifully on the everyday basis, if you count by the quality of scholarship, and I'm really proud of what is being published in Poland recently on the level of Jewish studies, I think it's top global quality. I'm very positive about this. There's no distinction by quality between what's published in Poland now or by Poles outside of Poland and what is global Jewish studies. So in this sense, we reach the peak, but there's very troubled future for the field because we need students, and the Gazan war plus the general crisis of the humanities, and we hear it all over Europe, all over the world. The number of students coming to the humanities is decreasing, plus the most general issues of the crisis of higher education all together. And this, it creates extremely difficult situation, especially in places where Jewish studies are so small area of study. If crisis of the humanities come to Department of History and they shrink from 300 applicants to 100 applicants, they are still good. If we go to below 25, it will be very soon. It might be not enough to open the new recruitment group.
Well, I'm very glad because we're all conscious of the very difficult situation we face at this time. Natalia, would you like to comment briefly on this question?
Yes, I think we're going dramatically from upbeat part of the discussion to less upbeat part of the discussion. Now, I'm speaking with experience of major state university, flagship university of the state of Florida, where we supposedly have at least 8,000 Jewish students, although this is a legendary number, and obviously there's no statistics on it because nobody's counting applications through this lens. I agree with Marcin that the situation at the American campuses is different. The Bad Shorstein Center of Jewish Studies, and I have the honor to have just become its interim director, operates as a center for Jewish studies for all students interested. Obviously, we are hoping to draw in a percentage of this vast number of Jewish students, but also non-Jewish students. And so my experience in that sense is maybe more optimistic than what Marcin describes. What we're trying to see this as an opportunity to both Jewish and non-Jewish students, to learn things, to help them understand this complicated world and gain insight. So we started offering a small course on Israel that doesn't require a big commitment in terms of study and homework from students, but it gives them exposure to various key issues in Israeli history, society, and culture. And it seems that we can still count on both Jewish students interested in some degree of Jewish studies exposure and non-Jewish students. I'm a lot more worried about the other aspect of what Marcin described, which is this general crisis of humanities, and finding ways in which we can present Jewish studies as a path to tangible, useful skills for students in the future. Our students are coming to the university really for vocational training for practical skills that will help them on the job market beyond the degree. And so this is something that I see as a huge challenge, because knowledge for the sake of knowledge appeals to a tiny percentage of students, although there are those as well. And I must say I was profoundly moved a couple of weeks ago at the event. We had a lecture we held. A student came up to me who said that she just switched from astrophysics to history major, and now she wants to do a degree, a diploma, a certificate in Holocaust studies. And I almost stopped myself from saying, why would you give up on astrophysics? But she said, this is so much more interesting. So yes, I think that for us, it is primarily the broader question of humanities, and how do we make Jewish studies as something that gives you skills that you can then use even if you are not going to continue beyond undergraduate degree.
Shaul, could you say something on this topic?
Something. I think the question is, will you be able to get me to stop? But I will say that these are not very happy days, and you have not caught me in a very positive mood, but I haven't had a good mood for a long time. That a lot of things are going in the wrong way, and what to me is rather remarkable is how in so many different countries things are going at the same time in the wrong way. And it would be nice to say that Israel had a monopoly on unpleasant situations, which should not have ever happened, but it seems to be a worldwide syndrome. And I think that the factors such as economic changes, factors such as new media, factors such as the different plans for economic activity, the options for earning a living on the basis of the humanities have all come together to create a very challenging situation. I hope that some of the conditions will change, but even if there is a different leadership in different countries, I have a feeling that some of the basic problems are going to stay with us even without the violence or without the material which we see each day on the media. The problems of low population growth, the problems of more computer skills running people's lives are still there. And I think that really the Littman Library has not only a function in encouraging scholarship, but has a key to translating academic scholarship into forms and formats that can reach a larger and not necessarily professional academic audience. And one of the things I've noticed about Littman books is they're not read by people who are studying professionally a field, but they're legible, they're understandable, they're read by people in all kinds of all kinds of ways of life, who are interested in understanding more about the world of the past and the world of the present. And I think that the model of seeking new audiences for knowledge, and not only new audiences to produce information, is a model that may have a potential to be implemented and adopted. And I think that just as Littman has led the way in the in the area between academia and the general readership, I think that the world of Jewish studies may have to move in that direction, and it may not be a total tragedy.
Well, thank you very much. I think that what we can draw from this discussion is that there have been great achievements in the past by Littman. We face very serious challenges, but these are challenges to which we need to rise. They are no different from the challenges immediately after the Second World War or at other times in Jewish history. And it's at these times that we need in particular to find the resources to answer the difficult questions which have been posed in this discussion. There are great achievements behind what Littman has done. It's a question of how do we continue this into the future? I don't know whether Connie would like to say anything on this.
Yeah, I would. I'd like to comment on what Marcin said, his question about whether we have a feminist agenda. We don't. But I think that Littman is friendly to women authors because our emphasis is always quality rather than schedule. And we have women who have problems with children and with parents. We had one author who I had to persuade, she didn't have to worry that she was going to give birth, we would wait for her. And I think that probably makes a difference. As to Shaul's comment on the accessibility of our books, I think it probably helps that most of the people who work with us are not Jewish. So they don't have the background in Jewish studies, except for what they've acquired through Littman books. So they are very sensitive, things that they don't understand. So that helps make our books accessible. I remember with Marcin's first book, we asked him, which was translated from Polish, we asked him to change the emphasis, to realize that our readership may not know about Poland, and he should explain things about Poland that a Jewish audience might not understand, or that a non-Polish audience might understand. So we have the possibility of really trying to work with authors to do the best we can to make their books accessible.
Connie, I think we should now let Halis get questions from the floor.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you. I think there's some questions that we really appreciate and we will share with you. But we came full circle, if I may, and with all due respect to our audience and to all of you, we came from the book, and as people of the books, or peoples of the books, you've really brought to life the importance of Littman and the publishing, but also the collegiality and the understanding that there's a goal of sharing, of gathering, researching, and sharing information and knowledge to as wide an audience as possible. And whether or not I read the book, I will learn from you who wrote an article or edited the book. And I think I see that as a great potential, as sort of a beacon of hope. And I know that the struggles that we all have in different fields in life, but coming back, Connie, with your comments about the commitment to different voices, different perspectives, and to continuing publishing in a world where reading a book is now not necessarily taught in school. We await what Littman will do and all of you will do as you bring scholarship and questions to whether it's the classroom or the periodical or to a conference. I think this is, unfortunately, we must close. We always want our audience waiting for more. We know that we will host you again, or those connected to you, because we really want here at Toby Center to bring as wide an array of topics, sometimes quite difficult, to all of you who are listening or watching. And so first I want to thank Connie, and we want to wish you, Littman, and all your colleagues a wonderful, successful next 60 years. As you know, we wish everyone in the Jewish tradition they should live to 120. May you all live to 120. And then, of course, while you're doing that, to bring up a new generation who will take up further. We're honored here at Jewry Center to be able to help you celebrate this milestone. We're indebted to Antony. He's a member of our committee, as is Natalia and Marcin. Shaul, you're welcome to join our TJH Talks Advisory Committee, but thank you for your questions and for spearheading this and for all of your work that you do for Litman, but for the rest of us in the world, here in Poland especially. We're grateful. Marcin and Natalia and Shaul, your conversation was warm and inspiring, a little provocative, and so honest, and we really thank you. We felt that we were in the room with you, and that's really what it's all about. So what I'd like to do now is, of course, after thanking you, thank our audience for joining us, and also a shout out to our team, Jakub and Kaya, without whom we wouldn't all be here. I want to remind you and ask you again, dear audience, this program is brought to you sponsored solely by donors. We'd like to continue, and we invite you to help us do that. And again, I want to come back to Tad. He would have been proud. And I believe all of you, if anything we can do to not just preserve his memory, but keep his legacy moving, thank you for being part of that process. We want to wish all of you Shana Tova, a year filled with joy, good health, and peace. And may we all continue as people of the book to learn and to teach. We look forward to seeing you for our special edition of TJ's Talks on the 28th of September. But until then, enjoy apples and honey, and may the sound of the shofar inspire us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.